Have you heard of all of these automatic transmissions in these Mercedes-Benz that are blowing a hole in the side, that are burning oil and actually need complete replacement, that need multiple visits to the dealership to fix weird electrical anomalies? Well, neither have I. There's many Mercedes that can actually last the test of time. Let's get into it now. Here's one for the win in terms of overall reliability, with a lot of the critics actually loving these vehicles for their durability. And really it comes down to the simplicity. Now, these vehicles do have a dual clutch gearbox, so they're a little rougher, a little more ragged. The ride quality is not quite the same as you're going to find in an E-Class or an S-Class. Those are luxury. This one feels a little more price point and certainly feels a little sportier, but there is a good look to this vehicle. I mean, you get the great LED headlights. Look at the star grills, sensors all over to make sure that you get all of the safety nannies to keep you in safety. Of course, this one's a sport. Look, flip away mirrors. And of course, look right there, you have this big sliding glass sunroof. Cycle around, you get this nice slow black, and you're gonna find these feels a lot more like the CLS, but this one is the CLA 250. But the difference between a CLA like this vehicle and the C-Class is this one's predominantly a front wheel drive vehicle with the addition of a little extra power to the back, whereas the C-Class is predominantly a rear wheel drive with the additional performance here. That's why most would argue that the C-Class is probably the place to start with the rear wheel drive, but the CLA is a lot of fun. And because of its simplicity, you don't have air ride, you don't have a lot of the other features, means there's less to go wrong, but yet you still have the shtick, you still have the marque, you still have the vehicle and the brand, and of course the three-pointed star, which means you can still enjoy a lot of the other features: safety, style, technology. So there have been some complaints with the double clutch gearbox. I've heard a few people complain about sunroofs, that they stop working, and there's been issues, charging issues. A lot of the electric systems, of course sensors, have been problematic from time to time, and you can even almost feel like a rock star driving around in one of these. These do come equipped with a turbocharged 2-liter engine, of course puts out around 200 ponies, give or take, depending on the generation. And of course, the rough, ragged ride means they're less efficient. They're certainly not rockets on rails, but they are a lot of fun to drive. And the price point means that almost anybody can get into these. The only downside is the rear headroom is quite tight back there. So for passengers in the back, you're likely going to have a little tougher time back there. Trunk space is also quite a bit smaller in these vehicles as well, because naturally it is all curved down. It's a good look. I love the style of this. You do get LEDs. You get a lot of the modern technology that all the bigger cars have without spending the big boy dollars. This also comes with some other added benefits: the reliability. JD Power gives us a 78 out of 100. Repair Pal says it's a 3.5 out of 5 star, and NHTSA gives it only 34 complaints, most of which are really tech related. And just sometimes the gearbox people aren't necessarily in agreement with, because it's dual clutch. It's a little bit more abrasive, a little more aggressive. And while they don't necessarily traditionally fail or catastrophically have any issues, the fact is the majority of the issues really is just more of a ergonomics or a feel or an expectation of the driving experience. These are fun cars. I've driven them. I was on the borderline of buying one, and I stepped up. I decided to buy the C-Class instead. But I definitely was looking at these: fun, reliable, and definitely for the win. Where would you rank the CLA for reliability? 1 to 5 star, 5 being the best, most reliable. Do you have one, or do you have a friend that has one? I'd like to hear your thoughts and opinions so we can put in a poll later. One of the most reliable Mercedes-Benz is the W205, like I have right here. It's a very popular model. The C-Class always has been. It's a great entry point. It'll give you a rear-wheel drive platform with an optional all-wheel drive system. C300 gives you an option of a 2-liter turbo. You can also get a C43, which is a V6. And of course, you can also get a variety of different AMG engines. But the reality is, this model specifically is one of the most reliable models according to these brands. JD Power gives these an 83 out of 100. Repair Pal gives them a 3.5 out of 5 star. And NHTSA says there's about 280 complaints against the vehicle. And granted, I've shared a lot of my lifetime stories with this vehicle. We've had about 4 years. We've had some electrical problems, many of which we believe were service induced. And of course, other than that, a few of the nickel and dime issues like squeaks and rattles and plastics that don't seem to fit all that well. But the bottom line is, squeaky plastics and components that feel particularly cheap aren't necessarily reliability issues. And according to all these manufacturers, many of these cars will go 200,000 to 300,000 miles. These clearly have the longevity in the legs. Now, under the hood here of the C300, you have a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine that was designed by Renault and ultimately creates about 242 horsepower, made it up to a 9-speed automatic transmission. Some of the older ones are 1 gear less, but ultimately the transmissions are bulletproof. The engines have had a few minor issues in earlier generations of the 205, of the 2-liter, but the V6s are absolutely through the roof in terms of reliability. The only real outstanding chronic issue with these vehicles is the high cost of maintenance, which you're going to anticipate. It is a Mercedes. You're going to spend a little bit more money, but also the EGR valve, which I had to get that resorted and fixed because it was a problem for ours. It spit out a check engine light, but there's a positive is that it's covered under an extended warranty. So outside of that faulty EGR valve or the fact that infrequent oil services and high carbonization can lead to failures of those EGR valves, the rest of the car is quite stout. It has exactly what it needs to last a long time. And very few trips to the dealer are actually required. We've never had the vehicle towed in, and the vehicle has been absolutely bulletproof in 4 years. It's also not just a pretty face with great headlights and a beautiful bold grille with these little starlights in the front. You get lots of chrome detailing on some models, 5-star rims, beautiful fold-away mirrors with LEDs, and look, you also get the big glass on the top, as many of their competitors do not, including BMW has a much smaller sunroof. Here you get, of course, beautiful lights on the back, they're LEDs, flip-away backup camera, and 4MATIC means you can get the optional all-wheel drive system on these cars. Even though the interior has some quality issues, and when you start moving and rattling parts, you realize that it's not necessarily the highest end and the highest quality in terms of fit and finish when it comes to some of the plastic components within. It certainly looks the part. The ergonomics are beautiful. It's functional. Everything works well. The ergonomics and the overall design is well thought out and well executed. It's a reliable vehicle through and through. Other than, like I said, some weird plastic issues. There was some early models that had some engine issues, but for the most part, these cars are known to run a long time. So the W205, one of those you really have to give them a look. If I could recommend going something 2019 and slightly newer. Right, here's another one on the list, and you cannot deny these. I've already mentioned I had an ML once. This is the newer generation that actually had vast improvements over a lot of parts, especially the plastics and some of the ergonomic components. Some of the best Mercedes are the 2008 Mercedes ML class. And this is ML, this is the predecessor to the newer GLE. This is the older version of it. And the first generation of the GLE essentially looked almost identical to this outgoing ML class. Now, these are beautiful vehicles. Again, I can attest, I owned one once. This one here, of course, has the beginning of what they call the LEDs. This is the ML 350, one of their better engines, especially in diesel format with the Blue Tech diesel. Any diesel engine is going to have carbon fouling and so on, but these are engines that were absolutely built to last a long time. When you think of some of those million-mile cabs, a lot of them are Mercedes-Benz diesels, and the only thing that really chokes them out is their emission systems. But a lot of these engines fundamentally have an extremely robust drivetrain, and they last a long time. The beauty is you can get all kinds of different engines with a 3.5-liter V6 gas engine, of course, making about 268 horsepower. You can get AMG versions of these vehicles, which put out a lot of performance, and of course, diesels to boot. So these are great, wonderful vehicles, fun to drive, very luxurious, a lot of the tech built into them already. But NHTSA only really had 109 complaints with regarding to any kind of outstanding issues. They've been around a long time, and 100 complaints for a vehicle that's been around for 15 years or so is a very, very big feat. There's about a 3 out of 5 star based on Repair Pal's reliability ratings, which makes it average and fair, and JD Powers ranks it at 82 out of 100. So this Mercedes ML vehicles are serious workhorses, and if you can find good ones around, they're definitely worth looking at. And generations like the 07, 08 definitely are also vastly improved from the older generations. The engines are all more or less the same or very, very comparable, but the beauty is now some of the plastics, the trim, the components on the inside of the vehicle is vastly better than it used to be. And the beauty is none of them really corroded all that bad, and these vehicles actually held up quite well, even cosmetically. So this is definitely one for the win. And I'd also like to hear your thoughts. 1 out of 5, with 5 being the most reliable. If you own one or you know somebody who's got one, I'd like to hear your rating. Please drop it in the comment section below, would you? And here we have the next model. It's getting a little older, and as that generation, they actually created vehicles that were slightly more dependable. They certainly were a little simpler. They didn't have all the modern technology, so there was simply just less to go wrong. And the 2007 Mercedes-Benz CLS class, like we're looking at here, is a very unique vehicle. And I've always found these very attractive because they have these very cool headlights, but more importantly, the CLS was essentially an S-Class, a bit something a little sportier, and you have this sort of gangster look at the back. You have this sloped back end, and it just slopes out nicely. This one here is a CLS 500, and any of that generation of Mercedes-Benz that carried a 500 designation actually is an absolute workhorse. We had an ML 500, and it is absolutely glorious piece. It's a V8 of course, twin plug, and it creates a decent enough power, but it's a very reliable unit. It has a mechanical water pump. It's a very simplistic drivetrain, and it's one of their truly best. So any of the Mercedes-Benz from that generation, from sort of that late 2007, were quite often very, very reliable. 5-liter V8, naturally aspirated, you really could not go wrong. Has all of the technology for the time, and of course, it's a vehicle that's just meant to rack up the massive miles. You get great ratings for this vehicle, and even some of the experts from JD Power rates it at 82 out of 100 for reliability. Repair Pal gives it a 3 out of 5 star, and NHTSA ranks it at only 39 complaints. Very few complaints because people love driving these. And even as a DIYer in our ML500 with the same engine that this thing carries, I was able to do most of the maintenance myself because all I needed to do is over a bunch of years, we did a water pump, I had to do a crank sensor on it once, and I did some spark plug and coil changes. Other than that, it was an absolute workhorse. Some of the plastics were a little flimsy and we had some issues with some of the fit and finish, but overall the vehicle was just absolutely ridiculously reliable, and I can definitely advocate for something with that 500 designation. Have you or anybody you know owned a CLS 500? I'd love to hear your rating, 1 to 5, 5 being the best. Give me a rank of reliability. Another very reputable and respectable Mercedes-Benz and a C-Class that you really need to think about in terms of one of the most reliable is not this vehicle. Unfortunately, they can go from one extreme to the nether, but it's a generation after this, which we have to say is around the 2009 mark with the C-Class. The C-Class was a great car at that point. Now, one exception is the 6.2 liter, the AMG, naturally aspirated, shuffling heads, cam wear, oil leaks, coolant leaks. There were problems with it, but they were a lot of fun. They sure made some great noises. But if you want some of the more reliable C-Class from 2009, you've got to stick with more of the lower end V6 engines, the naturally aspirated drivetrains. Those are durable workhorses and they get high levels of respect and reliability. I see lots of them still on the road with extremely high miles. 4th, 5th, 6th buyers are now buying them because they're easy to maintain, easy to look after, and they're not an arm and a leg. They're great buys on the used car market, and they're pretty reliable too. Maintenance costs, a little bit up there, but it's a Mercedes. That's to be expected. It's not a Honda, but it's not like an S-Class. It's not even like an E-Class. So the 2009 C-Class Mercedes-Benz is coming with some great results from JD Power, ranking them about 86 out of 100. Repair Pal says about 3.5 out of 5 star. And NHTSA says there's about 664 complaints. And again, they've been around a long time. It's not unexpected. They're a mainstream, sold in high volumes. So to have 600 complaints is not the end of the world. There have been issues. They're not perfect, but they are considered relatively reliable, and certainly one you need to be thinking about if you want to get into an entry-level Mercedes for pennies on the dollar. What are your thoughts on a 2009 AMG or not? I'd like to hear 1 through 5, 5 being the most reliable. I'd like to hear your own personal opinion, people you know or yourself. But right here is the next vehicle that's in line with some of the most popular models. And some people believe that the E-Class is really where Mercedes-Benz starts. That's the best quality, the best blend of the top luxury components, the elements, even the quality that goes into these vehicles, but they also look wonderful. And there's a big reason why the E-Class is a great place to start. You get AMG models that consist of twin turbo V8 engines. Here we have an E550S. Look, you've got LED taillights, carbon wing on here. Of course, there's a 4MATIC. You can get all-wheel drive in these vehicles too. And here, this is a little bit of an interesting offset, obviously an issue, but you've got nice chrome detailing. You get the big sunroofs, traditional Mercedes types of mirrors. And as you cycle around, you've got the more modern style on this Benz, but of course the traditional grille, which does make it look prominent and makes it look very, very substantial. And the 2014 Mercedes E-Class, like this one here, is one of those models that's ranks very, very high due to reliability, and one that is definitely worth a look if you want to get yourself something a little bit more upscale Mercedes. But these ones are rated by JD Power quality and reliability scores as 87 out of 100. Repair Pal gives these about a 3.5 out of 5 star, and NHTSA says there's about a 269 complaints logged ongoing for these cars. And a lot of that, they've been around for a while. I mean, this is almost 10 years old, and 269 complaints, it's a relatively low number, but it's an extremely complex car with high levels of performance. Is it going to cost you a significant amount of money to keep around? Yes. Mercedes-Benz E-Class, it's going to cost some maintenance dollars, but it is also one of those that isn't necessarily the biggest money pit, and it's one of those vehicles that is very, very luscious to drive. You have great interior finishing, leather interior, all kinds of nice detailing, heated, cooled seats, vibrating, and this thing will absolutely treat you like the king and queen. For sure, it's a beautiful vehicle. So what's your rating 1 to 5? 5 being the best of this vehicles right here. Do you know anybody, or have you personally owned one of these generation E-Class? I'd like to hear it. Now, who said reliability had to be boring? And Mercedes-Benz also brings some fun motoring. Here we have a hardtop convertible. Everybody knows the SL is the car to have. I know a neighbor of mine who's got the V12. He absolutely adores this vehicle. 2007 Mercedes SL Class. Absolutely gorgeous. You can tell it. Look at the headlights right there. Okay, right here you have that beautiful Mercedes grille, very traditional, but because it's a sportier car, you're going to keep that slightly more refined and downsized. Look, Mercedes-Benz calipers on there. Look at the beautiful ventilation, small mirrors, hardtop convertible I already mentioned. Look, easy access into this vehicle, and lots of great detailing along here. Look at the cute little antennae. Wow, what a little stubular. I've been told I have a little stubular too. Has that naturally aspirated V8 that is absolutely bulletproof. It's one of those engines, very easy to maintain, very reliable, and you can own it for years. Even DIY it if you prefer to, but these are very reliable vehicles. This is actually a very nice example. I see the owner decided to put a little bit of chrome detailing on there, a little bit of aftermarket parts, but look, you get AMG stamping on the wheels embossed there nicely. Beautiful finishing here. Look, nicely incorporated bumper sections here, and of course naturally 3-pointed star. Absolutely gorgeous car. JD Power also ranks this about 87 out of 100. Repair Pal did it at 3 out of 5, which is again a fairly healthy average. And as well as an NHTSA complaints say there's only about 19 complaints against these vehicles. In other words, most people love them, and there really hasn't been much to complain about. It's been a durable, reliable workhorse, expensive to maintain if you take it to the dealer for every single service. As they get to be this age, you probably want to start searching on how to do some of your own maintenance. But honestly, there are also a lot of small independent shops that can help you out with that. You just got to search it up, and they're absolutely glorious to drive. Beautiful vehicle. You can't go wrong here. And certainly with a style like that, it's one that you can stand back and absolutely gawk at. What would you rank that 2007, 2008 Mercedes SL, and especially the 500? 1 to 5, 5 being the best rating? I'd like to hear your thoughts. Drop it in the comments section below. As I've mentioned, Mercedes E-Class are some of the best Mercedes you can possibly find. The best sweet spot for reliability, lacking of over complexity, but yet they have enough tech to feel modern. They usually have some of the best drivetrains, and the E-Class is a wonderful vehicle. This one here is an E400, clearly a very modern vehicle. But what we're talking about, some of the most reliable used Mercedes-Benz come in a couple of formats. We'll give you 2 to share right now. A 2009 Mercedes E-Class, as well as a 2011 Mercedes E-Class. They're just indisputable as some of the most reliable and more classic looking designs. They're wonderful vehicles, but how do they rank? Other than the fact that the E-Class always has some great style, large space in the back for a lot of happy customers. You usually get bigger brakes and wheels. You get the latest tech on the front end. And of course, usually the E-Class gives you the better grills. And of course, both the 09s and 011s have wonderful grills. Clearly, you can get a very, very stylistic and very modern feeling car in any E-Class. Even the older ones feel still quite modern. And the 2009 JD Power gives it an 88 out of 100. Repair Pal says it's about a 3.5 out of 5 star for reliability. And NHTSA says only has 84 whiners coming at them. Well, I shouldn't say that. They're complaints, and they're usually legitimate. Trust me, I know as owning a Mercedes, there's usually some nagging issues, but 84 is very few. Clearly a sign after being on the road that long, not a big issue. And then the 2011s, JD Power gives them an 88 out of 100, a 3.5 out of 5 star for Repair Pal, and NHTSA says 286. So as you can see, the newer versions are starting to pick up a little bit steam in terms of problems, but still a very reliable Mercedes-Benz nonetheless, and one that definitely is worth a look if you want to consider getting something reliable, fun, and feels very much in the spirit of Mercedes-Benz. The E-Class from 09 and 011. Please, as well, be sure to drop a line. I'd like to hear both your thoughts on both these vehicles, 09 and 11, 1 through 5, and again, 5 being the absolute most reliable. Surely some of you must have owned some of these vehicles or know somebody who has. Any major issues that you can speak of? I'd like to hear it down below. Now here's the next one, and you never would have thought a car of this premium stature would be on the list of one of the most reliable Mercedes. You can actually have an S-Class. Not only is it one of the more reliable, but it definitely has a gorgeous look. I mean, first of all, look at these flares. I mean, that's one of the most pretty S-Class Mercedes-Benz that I've ever seen. I mean, look, you get that little flared bit right there and it absolutely stands out. But back in 2008, between Mercedes and BMW, they were competing. Naturally had to have some style continuity even between brands. But you can notice a bit of almost a bangle butt here. Not that bangle had anything to do with this, but look at the rear tail light assembly. Very similar to what you're seeing in BMW of the same generation. This one's an S550. And of course, Mercedes, and it's 4MATIC, means you also get the all-wheel drive system in this glorious car. Is absolutely gorgeous. Packaged with all of the technology, lots of seating space in the back, massive sunroof on top, typical Mercedes mirrors, and look, you get those little grills, and it certainly is a trademark component. Here we're talking about a blue efficiency, so we're dealing with the diesel in this particular unit, and you know that's good for tons of miles. Now, granted, this will be an expensive car to maintain. You know, there have been issues with some of the technology. The biggest issue, air ride, suspension problems, of course, oil leaks, you know, cam systems, and of course diesel engines and carbon fouling. There will be potential issues, but as long as you nip those problems in the bud and you don't let them fester, this is one of those best vehicles. Stay on top of your issues, keep the mileage at bay, and certainly drive the wheels off it, enjoy it, but do your maintenance, and this vehicle will run you for hundreds of thousands of miles and do it in the lap of luxury. And the beauty is JD Power gives us an 88 out of 100. Repair Pal says it's about a 3.5 out of 5 star. Believe it, it's actually better than some of its smaller cars. And NHTSA said there's only about 84 complaints to talk about. These 2008 Mercedes S-Class cars are some of the most pretty cars that they've ever made. And they're actually somewhat reliable for Mercedes-Benz. You can have your cake and eat it too. Definitely drop me a line, 1 to 5 in the comment section, 5 being the best. What would you rank this in your own personal opinion? Maybe through experience or word of mouth. But if you've been looking for a used Mercedes-Benz, right there, it's some of the absolute worst disasters. So if you're shopping, you want to avoid those. Check out that video. It's definitely going to help you. Hope to see each and every one of you on the next one, everybody. See you real soon. Bye-bye.